Okay, so meeting of the Faculty Advisory Committee, Board of Regents, December 10th, 2021. Hi, all. Let's begin. Let's begin with approval of the agenda. Motion?
Make a motion that we approve the agenda. This is Sean.
Sean? Okay.
And second, this is Myrna.
Myrna? Okay. Any additions, discussion?
The only question I had, Kalina, is the conference. I don't know if we're holding off on talking about that again until January.
Actually, I'm very glad you brought it up. Let's do it. Let's add, where would you like to add it? Should we do it right after number 7?
Sounds good.
Okay. And then there was also a request for a standalone item on COVID and next semester. So we can make that 9, and then our discussion and old new business will follow those 2. Does that sound good? Nothing else? All right. We take a vote to approve the agenda as amended with those 2 additions, FAC conference and COVID and next semester. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstentions? Objections? Okay. Approval of the November minutes. Forgot about that too, Lois. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We don't have any November minutes yet.
So we're going to have to postpone that to next time we meet, and I will send them out as soon as, right? Or Lois, you'll send them out as soon as we have a draft?
Yeah, I can send them. Sure. Yes.
And Kalina, as we were both present at the November 18th meeting, I've posted for the BOR those minutes, but if you wanted to review them and share them and post them as minutes for the FAC as well, we can do that for November 18th, as both committee, both the board and the FAC were present at those meetings.
And November 18th is our meeting?
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, the joint meeting.
The joint meeting.
Right. So
yeah, could you forward those? And
they're actually on the website under the BOR. So yeah, I can forward those to you. And if you would like to share them as FAC meeting minutes for that day, you can do that as well.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll forward them to you and to Lois.
Yes, please. And
okay,
David.
I'll take.
Yep.
And David. Okay, super. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Okay, so we're moving on to Stephen Marcellinus, who will present on a new idea, the Safe Course Task Force, and we'll have our reports after that. So take it away, Stephen.
Thank you, Kalina. Good afternoon, everybody. Today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a concept we'd like to move forward, it's called Safe Course. The idea is that with TAP and most articulation agreements, everything that we do as far as transfer for one campus to the next is based on the completion of an associate degree. And although we do encourage students to complete associate degrees, we do know that most students, that's just not their goal, or they don't intend, or they don't complete the full degree before they transfer. So the idea of the safe course concept is to address those students who are looking to take a semester or two at the community colleges and move on to a four-year institution, or again, simply don't finish before they transfer out. The idea is to look at the similarities between the newly created, or the revamped Framework 30 that's going to be that's being worked on and will be used come 2023, and see how that relates to the gen ed categories at the CSUs and Charter Oak, and then look at those categories and how there are some natural connections between each category. And I think I can share my screen. Is that right? Should be able to. Okay.
Are you able?
I think so. Yeah. So I think you should all see this. I did send this out, and I know Kalina put links to this in the agenda for you all to review as well. So really the idea is to look at, you could see in column A, these are the Framework 30 categories that will be moving forward for 2023. And then I listed in the other columns, and I'm sorry that not all of them show up, but if you scroll to the side, you can see Charter Oak is included in there as well. But if you look, and from basically written communication 1 down to quantitative reasoning, you could see that there are pretty organic connections between the Framework 30 categories and what's required at the CSUs or at the four-year institutions. So the idea behind the safe courses concept is to kind of formalize this process to say that if a student takes any historical knowledge course, if the course was vetted to meet the outcomes for historical knowledge, that course, regardless of what it is, stop looking at it as far as a course or course equivalent and more of an outcome to outcome requirement, is to say that historical knowledge course would translate to the history requirement at Central, historical perspectives at Eastern, time and place at Southern, and this is where, again, it is a little bit different with all the CSUs, but Western, they would have to determine the appropriate match, and then Charter Oak also has a U.S. history or a history requirement as well. The reason behind this is really to kind of simplify the transfer process, not just for students, but also for the faculty and staff that work with students as well. I'm sure you've all worked with students that come to you with questions in your program, and you probably feel more than comfortable speaking about and advising students with courses in your program, and probably feel comfortable about advising students with courses for transfer to certain universities or institutions within your program as well. But when it comes down to the general education requirements, you more than likely will refer that out to another resource or have to spend a lot of time searching through transfer equivalency banks or course catalogs or the like to try to figure out what courses match specific gen ed requirements for that institution. Again, this might be a way to alleviate that process a little bit by saying that, again, if you look at courses in these categories as comparable to the categories at our institutions for the very similar outcomes, that we might be able to simplify the process for all those involved. And it's also one of those things that I think, and I'm really glad that Myrna is on this call, because I think she would be able to speak to this as well. On the onboarding side at the universities, at the four-year schools, it would really help alleviate the work that goes on behind the scenes, that unless you are involved with admissions within the registrar's office or transfer advising, not all people are aware of how difficult it can be to try to get a very clean degree evaluation for a transfer student, to try to match up like where these classes should go, how they should be applied, to kind of come up with those workarounds, put in those workflows, make those exceptions, things along those lines to get the student the best return on their investment. This again would kind of simplify that process based on a lot of work that has gone on within the Framework 30, the new outcomes that FERC has created, and again, how they pretty much relate to the categories within the gen eds at the CSUs. The task force that I'm proposing would really have to do the work to look into this concept a little bit deeper and come up with or recommend the policy to try to formalize this so we can make it a reality and make it, again, just one step closer to a more seamless and transparent transfer for all the students within our system. So that is, stop sharing. So what I'm looking for you today is, I did send out, like I said, the draft charge for that task force. There is a link for it that Kalina has in the agenda. I'm hoping that you all had a chance to look at it. I'm looking for some feedback and suggestions as far as recruitment for membership. But I also see some hands. I didn't see what order, so Ronald, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, thanks, Steve. I guess I'm a little confused because it seems as though this work has already been done. The Framework 30, right, matches up the bucket to bucket with the state university. Why wouldn't we simply just apply that to any transfer student, apply those same buckets to any transfer student and be done with it?
If I agree with you, everything that I put forward is basically a concept that I came up with, but it's something that I want to make sure that we go through the process to really look at this from all different angles, because there might have been things that I've missed. So I really want to get, again, the task force, and if it is a very straightforward process and it's only a few meetings that we have to go through, that's great. But I would like to go through the process of really looking at this from, because my experience is, like I say, Gateway, Southern, some of the other community colleges, working with colleagues at the other CSUs, but really to vet this out to make sure that we are looking at it from all angles. But absolutely, so that's really why I kind of want to just push it along a little bit further to make sure that I'm not missing anything. I think Sean was.
Sean and then David.
Hi, Steve. How you doing? I guess I'm kind of confused a little bit too. Is like Ronald mentioned, in a sense, I get the concept, right, that you put forward, but doesn't this kind of undo the work that's been done to create the TAP programs? I mean, one of the reasons that we created TAP was, well, multi-tiered, right? One was to make it seamless so students could transfer from community colleges to the universities. But the second, kind of less talked about goal was to promote associate's degrees, right? So this almost kind of undoes that concept of promoting getting an associate degree is important for students. And I guess I'd like your feedback on that.
No, it's actually a great point, because I think it kind of helps in that sense, because think of all the programs that do not have a TAP degree associated with it. And because the proposed, and I believe it went through APRC, the proposed liberal arts and science degree moving forward that incorporates the Framework 30, if we move with this concept, it then opens a lot more flexibility for those degrees that do not have a TAP degree. It also allows the opportunity for those students who aren't sure. That was one of the biggest things with TAP. One of the biggest issues and concerns is that for TAP, it's program to program. If a student is not sure or undecided, then they don't have an option in TAP either. So this would allow a student to use that liberal arts and sciences degree to then take basically the same same advantage of a transfer ticket, but allow for the flexibility to explore different majors or to pursue a program that doesn't have a specific pathway already created. It also allows time for students who are undecided, and for the faculty and staff working with those students, the ability to say, well, as long as you take courses in these categories, we know you're good. And it allows them time to move through the process, and hopefully by the time that they run out of the safe course options, that they'll know where they want to go, what they want to do. And I think it would actually encourage more students to complete the associate, because they know that the courses that they've taken have that direct outcome, that direct applicability to the 4-year degree. So, but I absolutely agree. You know, I see where you're coming from, but I do believe it would help with completion, because it would allow for that, for students to know where their courses and credits are going.
Steve, thank you so much for that answer. I think that very much explains everything that I had wondered about. So thank you. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. David?
Yeah, I don't want to preempt other people, but I think this is a good idea. I was involved in 2008 in some earlier effort at the level of the 4 CSUs to do this kind of a thing, but it was done course by course. And then you had to demonstrate 80% equivalent in content and courses, and it never went anywhere. Besides, obviously, you know, a 100 level philosophy course at Central was equivalent to a 100 level philosophy course at Eastern, let us say. I like the idea that this is done category to category. And I think that will make it a lot more realistic and flexible, so that when you look at a student's transcript and you see a bunch of transferred courses from the community colleges as 1XX, 2XX, 3XX, and they haven't been distributed into general education, this would really facilitate it. I mean, as chair of the philosophy department, I had to deal with that very often. And it was kind of a mystery. What was the original course that they took? What kind of equivalence could I find to one of the courses in philosophy, and so forth? For the purposes of general education, I think this will work well. I do think that there needs to be this task force, as you call it, because some of the things have to be fine-tuned. For example, when you have social and behavioral sciences as you're in category A, at Central you're putting it into social science. Sadly, and despite my best efforts to change it since 1989, we have 2 study areas, social sciences and behavioral sciences. It's a mystery to the students as to which goes in what, but there it is. And so that's the kind of thing that I think a task force could, you know, in a couple of meetings. And I think what Steve is offering is both realistic and feasible. And so I think it's a good idea.
Thank you, Dave. Ronald?
Yeah, I'll just follow up. I think you might want to change the name. I mean, I think there's a lot of suspicion out there. First of all, of the system office in general, but secondly, of this tendency to reduce requirements and reduce the curriculum and to strip it out of undesirable courses or undesirable programs. And I do think that calling something a safe course implies that there are unsafe courses, or there are courses that are undesirable that we want to get rid of, that we want to take out of the gen ed. And I think if the purpose of this task force is to eliminate courses from our gen ed, you're going to meet a lot of resistance on that, Steve. And I'm not saying that's what the purpose is, but when we start talking about fine tuning and that kind of thing, that is code to faculty of eliminating their courses from the gen ed.
Oh, understood. No, I hear that. And yeah, that could definitely, again, I think, again, another reason why I think the task force is needed, just to, again, look at this from other angles. I look at it as safe from the point of, so my background's in advising. So when I say a safe course, I think of a course that I know will transfer safely. That's the way I was looking at it, but absolutely I did not consider it from that angle. So I appreciate that.
I guess I'll jump. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
Myrna.
Myrna.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My only, there are two things. One, I wanted to say that at Central, whether it's called a safe course or a general course, typically in my conversations with the transfer counselors from the community colleges, they felt that transfer was the most seamless transition for students coming in and out, because even if it does come in as in 1XX or 2XX, we find a home for those courses. So when Steve presented this concept, I said, I think it's good for those that are outside of the TAP, because the TAP has already built into our banner system. When they come in with the framework 30, it's automatically populated in the different study and skill areas for our gen ed. So it's really a seamless transition. It's those specific professional programs that they may not align, but they're not part of our TAP. So for those students, this would be ideal. And then the other thing I would ask, Steve, is that you include in the list of memberships the academic articulation offices on our campus. Example, mine, as a separate from the advising, because I'm knee deep, head deep in transfer credit evaluation, so, and course assessment. So I appreciate that. That's it.
No, absolutely. Thank you, Marina. If you want to just send me a quick email with a description of that, I'd be glad to make the addition.
Thank you.
I guess I have a question, and it may be a very naive question, but especially since Myrna just said that all of the stuff is automatically populated for TAP, so maybe the processes that keep that in place will keep this in place. But just in terms of asking about, this can't be a one-off, the task force. There's going to be a lot of maintenance necessary to keep up with the different CSUs and categories and changes and so on. And do you see, because I think in the past, with TAP, there have been some things that have not been maintained the way that they should be or tracked the way they should be. Do you see the capacity for maintaining this so that it remains up to date going forward?
I do, because what's going to happen is, once courses are vetted for the framework 30 categories, okay, and that process is going to happen because of the new SLOs and that's moving forward already with what FERC is doing. Once the new courses are vetted for those framework 30 categories, essentially it will come down to the registrar's offices at the CSUs to it's either going to assign a course for course equivalency for the course that's already in that category. So again, the history to history. So if it's a Western Civ for a Western Civ, or it might be something along the lines of, okay, we don't offer that course, but as long as the CSU or Charter Oak assigns an attribute that assigns it to that category in their gen ed, then again, it'll automatically happen. And that's the nice thing about it. It's kind of like what Mirna was saying with the transfer tickets. I know, especially at Southern, Banner was programmed that once the transfer ticket's completed, all the exceptions, all the waivers, all that stuff automatically flips in. But without TAP, it's course for course. So if they don't see that attribute, if they don't see that course for course equivalency, the student does not get credit for it in that particular gen ed requirement. This would say, here are the courses in historical knowledge. They all flow into this area of the degree at the CSU. And again, depending on where we are in 2023, if CSCC is there, this new college will have to be created for every transfer bank at every CSU. The courses will have to be created for every transfer bank at every CSU. So this work would have to be done. It would have to be done anyway.
Are there any other questions or suggestions?
The only other question that I had for this body was as far as recruitment of membership. I was told that FAC has a model for nominating and putting in place membership for the small, large, and medium-sized campuses from the CCs. Uh-oh. So, Kalina, can you explain that, or is that something that I should use? Is that something?
I mean, yeah, and Barbara Richards did a lot of that work in the past. I can definitely share that with you, and you can see whether that makes sense for you, for sure.
Okay. I'm also open to suggestions as far as, again, I want to make sure that the right people are involved with this, especially, you know, those that are involved with the gen ed commitment, gen ed requirements at the institutions, especially at the CSUs. So again, any suggestions? I know FERC recommended that I approach the general education committees at the four-year institutions in particular, which I think is a great idea. But especially for the community colleges, like, again, let me know.
Yeah, I mean, you have here 4 community college faculty. And that would be, we have 3 categories, like small, medium, large, and you'd probably want to be drawing from like curriculum committees or something like that. So, but I'm sure that the framework that we have might give you some ideas about how to do an election or something like that. But yeah, I'm glad you're thinking about election strategies. Anyone else? Oh, Frank, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess back to Ron's point and a couple of other people, Steve. I don't know what to make of this initiative. It's an interesting one. I think it definitely has value. I haven't kept up with TAP since I left FERC, but one thing, we struggle with at Tunxus and probably elsewhere is the advising part. There's not really one place that I know of you can go to find clearly information that's going to help advisors and students. So both for this initiative and TAP, I think that's probably something that still needs to be worked on, and that has to be kept up to date. I mean, that's got to be updated constantly. So that's a lot of work, and I don't know who's going to do that work, but that definitely has to be part of this initiative, and I think TAP too.
I agree, and I think that's one of these things that this will address, is that idea to give a resource that simply says, instead of trying to track down, because that's what we have on the website right now, is the equivalency banks. And those things are difficult to, I mean, they're not difficult to navigate, but you really don't know how the courses are applied to the degree. So if we could say that, again, your scientific reasoning course goes specifically to this area at Central. I mean, that's pretty, and we don't have to list all the classes because the classes are already listed on DegreeWorks for the student's degree evaluation at the community college. So it's working with what we have and just making it, again, a formalized process to say that if we're already doing this, then great, but let's say that we're doing it. Let's make sure the attributes are there so that students, and I mean, it always comes down to the students when they get to the CSU. If they don't know about some of these things, then they just go along like everything's great, not knowing that they might be missing out on some credits. So that's the big one, Fran. Yes, I agree.
Right. Well, I guess I'll just reiterate then, basically, since Fran, you have the same concern, that I wonder whether, and I don't know, maybe this is part of what you do. I really don't have a concept of how labor intensive this is, but if there is a cost associated with making sure that this is continuously updated, as opposed to a one-off that then becomes outdated and more misleading than anything else, that maybe that be floated right up front, so that this work definitely goes towards something that'll be valuable going forward.
I think as far as maintenance goes, and I think this is what David was saying before, the category to category is so important because yes, we could go through whatever is created for the, you know, the block that's going to move forward in 2023 with all the, and again, I use historical knowledge a lot because I think it's a pretty safe one to talk about. So say there's 20 courses in historical knowledge that get vetted for historical knowledge at the community colleges. All right. If at some point another course gets vetted for historical knowledge, then that would have to be reviewed and again accepted, and that attribute would have to be placed on it at the receiving institutions so they know. But the evaluation process would basically be saying that we recognize historical knowledge to meet the requirement for this category, and as long as the faculty at the two-year school agree that that course meets the historical knowledge outcomes, then it should work. So there will be some conversations that would have to move forward once courses are added to, you know, vetted to the categories moving forward. But again, as long as they're being vetted to meet the outcomes, and the outcomes are what we're looking at as far as the matching criteria, then we should be okay.
Carmen?
Yeah, I have a question because I'm looking at this. So like, for instance, in science, we have courses with labs, and we say, okay, all courses with labs are scientific reasoning. And then to CCSU, it's going to transfer in as a SA for natural science. And then scientific knowledge, those are basically, we're giving that to courses that don't have a lab. But then it will transfer to CSU or CCSU as the same category. And within scientific reasoning and scientific knowledge, you have all different levels of the science courses. And so what I'm just curious about, I guess it's like, what exactly at CCSU is SA for natural science, where you can have the lab class or non-lab class transfer in. But then at ECSU, it's, the scientific reasoning class can transfer in as a T1 natural science, but the scientific knowledge can as a T2 natural science. And so it's really hard, I think, to really evaluate this, because I've spent years and years with the biology committee going over this to kind of see what exactly, I mean, like, are we able to differentiate the different levels of courses at Capital and say, oh, they, like this course here, that's biotechnology, it's a 200 level lab, it's going to transfer in the same as a simple bio 100 non-lab science. So just by looking at categories, I feel like I don't know, I even have problems with just categories within this community colleges, like this course is scientific reasoning, but this course is scientific knowledge. I mean, yeah, so I'm just concerned if we just stick with categories that we're just going to miss a lot of stuff. And anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
For the sciences in particular, I would definitely refer to, again, for Southern, they've been doing it for years for essentially non-STEM majors, that a student that came in with TAP vetted 3-credit and 4-credit science, that their gen ed science requirements were met. And it's the idea that they were getting the general concepts of what they need moving forward within the general education. So it definitely would be different for different majors, STEM in particular, but that's what we're getting at here, is that, you know, as far as the gen ed goes, how fine detail do we have to get for students that, or again, the task force would be really helpful in talking these items out.
Okay, all right, because I think I probably don't quite understand the whole idea. So as long as you're somebody you kind of got a grasp on it, that's good.
Thank you, Steve. And I will, Myrna, again, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make a quick comment relative to what Carmen said. I just want to make sure that I think, and Steve, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but many of these courses that would fulfill at least Central's gen eds have already been vetted. And so because they already have been vetted, like the 100 courses you're talking about, regardless of what level, those are easy courses to put in under either one of those categories that you mentioned. to fulfill the science, the natural science requirements at CCSU. So many of them who have been vetted, I'm not one to want to reinvent the wheel. Let's say if biology 121 was a course that we accepted under our natural sciences, it will always be accepted under natural science, and that may be one of the safe courses that students should take. One of the other courses that just comes to mind is the nutrition. Nutrition has been a course that we have applied to our gen ed because the minimum requirement for most of the majors is 2 sciences, one with a lab, one without. Nutrition doesn't have a lab, but it's a common course that has been vetted. And so Central, that student who has taken a 121 and the nutrition course would have met that natural science requirement for Central. And each of, I believe, those 2 courses meet the 2 different scientific knowledge courses that you're talking about. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, thanks, Myrna. Yeah, that does help a little bit. I will just say that I feel like I'm a little hesitant to just put so much meaning onto this course is scientific reasoning, whereas this course is scientific knowledge. It was kind of a crapshoot. I mean, aren't they both scientific reasoning, scientific now? I mean, so I'm just a little bit concerned that we're just kind of adhering to just this one description of the course. But anyway, but that makes sense. So, and I'm glad it's working pretty well anyway. So thanks.
You're welcome.
All right. So I hope that was helpful, Steve, the feedback. And I will share the election. I laughed because it seems to boggle everybody's mind, but I'll share that with you if you'd like. So thanks again for being here.
No, I appreciate it. And, if anybody wants to share any other comments or feedback, please feel free to contact me. I'd be more than happy to discuss, or just email. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, let's move on to the reports of the chair and vice chair. Do you want to start, David?
Oh, I was hoping you would start. Okay, I will start.
If you want, sure.
No, it's okay. There were just a couple of items that I had to bring up. Firstly, there was the special meeting of the Board of Regents in November. Normally, there isn't a scheduled meeting in November for the board. I don't know why. But in any case, there was one where 2 outside consultants were brought in who had prepared a more than 20-page presentation and then a multi-slide PowerPoint on different ways in which different states organize public higher education. And actually, for 50 states, there's pretty well 50 different ways. But I thought that there was an interesting discussion, and I'll just bring up the point that I made, which is there are ways of coordinating what is going on in colleges and universities within a public higher education in a state, other than through mergers and consolidations. And I brought up the point that if we look at really the environment in which we actually operate, which is determined by Section 185 of the state statutes, it's quite clear that we are in Sector B of the, I believe it's B. A is Yukon and its various campuses, but we are in the second sector. And there are 3 sectors, namely, of course, the community and technical colleges, Charter Oak as a state college, and the 4 CSUs. And of those, 2 of them are systems, the community colleges and the state universities. So if you think about it, we are a system of sectors of constituent universities, which are themselves, and colleges, which are themselves systems. So I would say we are a system of sectors of systems. And there is a methodology known as system of systems, which deals with precisely the kind of problem against which we've been butting our heads for I don't know how long, right? Between everybody's independent and nobody coordinates and does whatever they please, and everybody gets merged and consolidate, and there's a central authority which tells everybody what to do, there is the system of systems approach. I'm not going to belabor the point now, but I think it's something that I'm definitely going to bring up at the next board meeting in terms of the report from the vice chair. And that is a way of maintaining the autonomy of constituent systems, like our 12 community colleges, with due respect for cooperation and coordination between and amongst them. And in fact, there was at the recent meeting, and perhaps Kalina will talk more about it, the example of the New Mexico system, and how they are building from the bottom up exactly what is unsuccessfully being attempted to do here from the top down. So that's the first point I wanted to make. The second point was about the Finance Committee. We had a brief meeting this week, and I brought up once more the new funding formula, because when I asked for a more detailed breakdown of how this affects the 4 universities, so this is a funding formula change to the 4 universities, and I think I mentioned this at our last meeting, and I'd asked, how does this change the amount allocated to the 4 universities independently of the one-time additional fringe paid for by the state? And I did get a response from the CFO, Ben Barnes, and in fact, it works out that Central loses $1.35 million. That's a lot of money. Southern loses $3.08 million. That's even more money. Western gains 3.91, and I certainly don't begrudge them getting additional funds, but it would seem that it's just being taken out of Central and Southern. Eastern remains on a par, and the system office, which they included in the statistics, has a slight reduction. That's a problem, and that's something to which I think we need to come back. And I've asked again at this Finance Committee meeting, Ben Barnes, to explain why 2 of the universities suffer significant reductions. Well, every $1 million, that's about at least 8 full-time faculty, perhaps even 10, and that could be up to 80 sections of classes available to students. So I will report back on that when I get more information from Ben Barnes on that issue. But that was approved at a meeting of the Finance Committee, the previous one, based on a 2-page report from the system office, which I thought at the time was inadequate, and then approved without any further discussion, except for my asking again the same question about how it affects the regular budgets for the 4 universities, without any discussion by any other member of the board. I contrast that with a resolution that we also passed at the Finance Committee on naming of facilities and programs. That was an excellent presentation that was made. It was a over 10-page report, covered all of the various aspects of it that you could imagine, and I think was a job well done. In comparison, 2 pages for the funding formula for the universities, clearly inadequate. So I just wanted to contrast those 2 items that came up at the last meeting of the Finance Committee. That's all that I have at this point. I have more on the vaccination, but that's a separate issue, or a separate item on the agenda. Myrna, did you have a question?
I do, as it relates to the finance. At some point, with your figures, are the new added positions at all part of that finance report for the pathway advisors?
No, the path advisors at the university level, or at the
No,
community?
at the community colleges, the new 150 positions.
No, the 174 actually.
Oh, it's 174, okay.
That are proposed. About half of them already have been advertised for. No, this is just for the universities.
Oh, just for the universities, okay. Nothing has been done in terms of the community colleges?
Well, I mean, I went through every week we get a notice. I don't know if you all get a notice of positions being advertised by the system, which are almost always positions at the community colleges, by the way, since the universities advertise their own positions. And there's been over 400 positions advertised in the last 8 months, of which at most a dozen were for full-time faculty on tenure-track positions. So there certainly is a lot going on, and I haven't done the last month or so, so I have to add that in. But I would say there's over 400 positions, and most of them, I guess, are being filled internally. Although the advisors, I would think, would not be being filled internally, and there's at least 70 or more which were advertised for already at the level 1, and perhaps some at the level 2 advisors. Because remember, there's three different levels of advisors, right? Level 1, level 2, and then level 3. So to answer your question, Myrna, that's a problem, I think, at the level of the community colleges, where there's a huge musical chairs going on, but also additional hirings. But that's separate from the funding formula for the universities.
Okay, but they do have a similar funding formula, right? And so shouldn't that be looked at as well?
Yes, and of course, who knows what that becomes under the one community college? That's a good question. I'll bring it up at the next finance committee meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. So I wasn't able to attend that special session of the BOR, or it was 1 hour long, and I couldn't attend for the first half hour. And so I'll report on academic and student affairs. So there are quite a few sort of interesting things that I think, for example, there was a brief KPI report from Greg DeSantis, and it's worth taking a look at the recording of the meeting. I don't feel that I can really give you a good synopsis of it, simply because I'm still a little, I'm unsure about what the KPIs are doing with us. We're tracking things like full-time enrollment and the extent to which we're increasing full-time enrollment. And I'm not clear on how the things that we are tracking with data correlate with the goals that we actually have for, like, serving student needs, supporting enrollment, that sort of thing. So I think it's worth returning to it. I didn't have the time to think through it that thoroughly, but I do know that one of the suggestions, so I'm glad Mary Beth brought up the issue of the conference. But one of the suggestions for what we could do with the conference was to talk about the sort of meaningful measures that we might want to start tracking that that do inform our actual goals. You know, there are a lot of correlations in terms of what we're tracking. Absolutely, there's a correlation between full-time enrollment and graduation, but it's not a causal category. So it's not really related in any way towards our initiatives in supporting enrollment. So it's worth revisiting. I think it's worth kind of listening to it, but the link to the KPIs is there, and a little bit of the narrative from folks in the system who are using these numbers is there. Oh, that's good to know, Ron. AACU, AACNU, is that the one? Yeah. There were 24 programs and certificates for CSCC approved at ASA without comment or question. And I think that's worth noting because I want to share with you this workflow. I have it somewhere. 231. I'm navigating the ASA agenda. Sorry. So let me share. Oops, that's not the one at all. Hold on, I'm going to stop sharing. So we will get to that in a second. Where'd you go? Hold on, sorry. The agenda. My apologies. Okay, let's try that again. There it is. Okay. So this is the workflow for the degrees and certificates that went through. Don't trust my numbers, but if I remember correctly, it was like 18. Actually, no, just forget the breakdown because I believe it's 18 programs and 6 certificates, but I could be wrong about that. This is the workflow. And it is this workflow that makes it possible that, you know, it's a lot of degrees, and so they pass right through ASA without any discussion. I also attended the CCIC meeting at which they were approved on the consent agenda. That meeting lasted fewer than 10 minutes. 5 of those minutes were a description of this process to assure us that there have been many, many eyes on it. But last month, I forwarded you a resolution from Naugatuck Valley, where I believe the frustration was that there just wasn't enough time for the, you know, the participation of the 12 campuses and 12 colleges and their official, you know, feedback. So I know that at Gateway, there has been a lot of struggle to keep up with the pace. We find out that there are new programs for review. We have less than a month to get them to our departments and then get them to curriculum and then get official feedback to the systems, so, or to, you know, system office. So nothing has been done. We don't have eyes on it. Of these 24 programs and certificates, there were 40-something members of faculty working on those programs. So that's about maybe 2-ish folks on each of them. APRC does exist, but I do think there's reason to be a little concerned about how many people are actually weighing in and looking at these programs in any depth. I do know when things come through curriculum and Gateway, we look at them in painful detail. And now we are building a whole lot of curriculum without that kind of, and you know, the curriculum is kind of like, it's like building a bridge. It has to like work together. It's intricate. And I'm concerned. I don't know. I would like to hear from you all whether you think there's need for concern. I did not voice my concern at ASA. I was interrupted in the meeting. And also, I've brought this concern before, and the response was that workflow document and an explanation of how it works. So it seems futile to just keep saying the same thing again. I think I think it's understood that that's not happening, and we're moving forward anyway. So it is exhausting sometimes to just keep saying things that I know people already know. So I would like to just pause for a second and just ask whether this process is playing out at most colleges. Yeah, Ron.
Yeah, you were referring to our curriculum committee's resolution that they put forward, saying that they do not have the time to review this work at the level that we typically look at. I mean, you know, this committee spends hours and hours and hours and weeks on reviewing curricular changes at Naugatuck Valley. You know, speaking to what Steve was saying earlier about looking at outcomes and having everything be outcomes based, that only works if the program outcomes are measurable and are effective outcomes. If you don't have courses and you don't have programs with effective outcomes, reviewing those outcomes is meaningless. You can't use them for transfer. You can't use them to guide the lesson planning or anything else. I mean, if they're garbage. And I tried to keep up with this flow of aligned programs last spring. I put together multiple resolutions with feedback on these proposals, spent hours and hours just on myself going through it with a fine-tooth comb and picking out all of the outcomes that were really poorly done, poorly designed, unmeasurable, and went through, and I also provided a lot of feedback. Most of the feedback that I provided came back as not within the faculty's purview to argue. That was the response I got from Fran Rosselli Navarro, was that most of the things I pointed out as problematic for Naugatuck Valley Community College were items that the board could decide on their own, and faculty input was unacceptable in that particular, for those particular areas. So that's when I sent our resolutions to NECHI for them to look at them, and received a response saying that they were concerned by the lack of shared governance and that they would be keeping an eye on it. So that's sort of my participation in this process.
Okay, thanks. Lois?
Norwalk Senate, we voted on a resolution. I'm just trying to find it. It was last, or whatever it was, a few months ago. Just saying that because of the time frame and everything else, we voted against the first 6 they put through, and they put them through very quickly, and we had no time to go over them. So our next resolution just said, or it included, that resolution included the fact that we were not going to approve anything that came through APRC because of the time limitation and everything else behind it. So it's there now that whatever comes out, it's not approved by Norwalk.
So I just want to take note of the fact that we just heard from Gateway, Naugatuck Valley, Norwalk. Those are 3 of the 4 largest colleges in the system, which means that we are putting these things through without any official sort of endorsement from the places that serve the largest communities of students, the largest number of students, and from places that are primarily in urban areas. I don't think we have anyone here from Manchester, but that just seems problematic on many levels, whether, even if not practical, on a principle level. Fran?
Yeah, briefly, at Tunxis, for the same reasons, there is no viable process here. There is no time to look at these things. So when those proposals come to our governance, they're information, where they're simply presented. Here's a list of programs that have been aligned. There's never a single question, and that's true also at our curriculum committee. Some individuals, I guess, are giving feedback, but again, I recall Mike Stefanowicz saying multiple times that the deadlines of the board are driving this. He was crystal clear about that. So there is no time to look at these, and they're not being vetted. We know that. They're not being vetted properly. They're just being pushed through.
Yeah, again, I feel like this is a zombie with its head cut off, because I don't see any communication to the board that there's need for time. You know, you would think that these requests from the colleges might facilitate a bit of a more humane process where there are eyes on it, so that we know nothing's going to blow up in the future. Instead, when any concern is expressed, we're given this flow chart that reflects, I don't know how much reality, right? So I don't know who's advocating, like no one seems to be acknowledging the needs here, and we need to be advocating for the I don't know who's advocating for the colleges. Lois, and then Ron.
I just found it. We passed it May 18, and it just says that Norwalk Community College Senate, as the shared governance body of Norwalk Community College, does not approve nor endorse any of the degrees and certificates developed through the processes formulated through the charge of the APRC. And that's the resolve. The whereas is all talk about why and its time frame and not supporting curricular documentation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so we did it.
Okay. Ron.
Of course, when they came up with their update as to I guess the report to NECHI that they submitted over the summer, they stated that despite the fact that they did not have endorsements from many colleges, it didn't matter because those colleges had representatives on the APRC. The problem is that the person who is on APRC for Naugatuck Valley's faculty does not represent Naugatuck Valley, because our faculty senate, our governance bodies, basically passed a resolution saying that unless we through our own voting process, through an elected process, unless we choose a representative for that committee, anyone who serves on that committee does not represent us. And the person on that committee is a junior faculty member, brand new faculty member that didn't know what she was getting into. And when she got on the committee, reported back that the committee has no bylaws and has no rules, and therefore is a free-for-all, and the system office people are basically ramming things through that committee as well. So so that's the report we got back from the person who doesn't represent us, but is sitting on that committee.
And yeah, and I saw in the chat, it's the same for other colleges, certainly the same for Gateway. And there's been we've heard a lot of frustration, or reports from people on APRC about the inadequate structure. For David.
Yeah, I don't want to preempt anybody else who wants to discuss precisely the process questions. I just, got interested in looking at what is getting aligned, because I'm at the university, I'm not at the community colleges. And so when I looked at their page, which may not be up to date, the only programs that were there were technical or professional programs. I didn't see alignment for any of the things like history, English, never mind philosophy, which of course doesn't even have a TAP. But and I was curious to look at what's going on, so I just chose two of them, more or less, not quite at random. One of them was radiation therapy, but it turns out it's only being offered at 2 community colleges, and it has different intern aspects to it because of the local hospitals and radiation facilities in the area. So I was wondering if someone could explain to me what does it mean for this to be aligned? Can you take this at Northwest Community College? Clearly, they don't have the equipment there. They don't have the links to the hospitals and to the diagnostic centers. So that was one thing I looked at. And I also looked at, and this one I thought was quite interesting, because I suppose if I hadn't chosen philosophy when I was much younger, I was interested in railroads. And it turns out we have a railroad engineering technology program in signal and communications. And so I looked at that, right? And it's actually quite interesting. But is that the kind of thing which is going to be offered? It seems to be only offered at 1 community college. How is this being aligned and offered at 11 other campuses, if that's the case? So that was just maybe it's a rhetorical question, but it seemed to me those were 2 significant problems. One, that the academic programs are not even there. And secondly, a lot of these technical and professional ones require the expertise of faculty at a particular campus or at a particular college, and can't be taken just anywhere. So I was wondering if someone could help me out on this.
8 in this batch were offered at 1 institution only, 8 of the 24.
Yes, 8 of the 24? Okay.
Yeah.
So they were easily aligned.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think one of the things we were concerned about was like reducing the diversity of programs, which was one concern. But at the moment, we're not yet seeing that. We are seeing a shift of control from the colleges to the system office, but we're not seeing, I know at Gateway, lots of folks were really excited about one, I forget what it was. It was something related to communication, that it was getting aligned, because then that should mean, right, that we're going to get funding to have the appropriate facilities to offer that also. And that's absolutely not the case. And that was like the only sense in which I could imagine that this could, be an effort in the service of equity, which is something that they're talking about. But thus far, I don't know that it has increased our capacity. It hasn't also reduced our capacity yet. It has simply shifted control in one direction. Lois.
What I've been hearing, and my understanding of what's going on right now, is that they were supposed to have had all these programs aligned by January, and they're not doing it. So they are under the gun. So they're begging, borrowing, and stealing, and saying to anybody with anything, give us your program, submit your program, whatever it is, because they need to show something to NETCHI. So, and it's not like these programs that are being offered at 1 college or only 2 colleges are going to be expanded to any more. They're not. It's just because they don't have the equipment, they don't have the faculty who are able to teach those courses, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They just want something to be able to show NETCHI at this point in time.
And but hold on, Lois. It's not by January. The original deadline was what? Like 2019. I'm looking for it now.
Oh yeah, but and now I think actually it was right now by the end of December they were supposed to have had this. That was the latest deadline, I think, by the end of December.
Right. Ron.
Well, I mean, one of the criticisms, one of the critiques I made last spring that I was told was not for the fact that was none of the faculty's business. Okay, was that the creation of all these boutique programs would create massive confusion for students and advising when students found out that despite the fact that this was in the catalog for the college, that they would have to travel 2 hours to get to the courses for that particular program. So that was one of the critiques I made. The other critique I made was that if we do open it up and we do have all these little boutique programs and we replicate them throughout the system, has anybody looked into what that will do to enrollment in the current programs as they exist? For instance, we have the only horticulture program in the entire state at the 2-year level. And if for one reason or another, Tunxus decides to contract with a greenhouse in Farmington, right, and decides to start offering their own horticulture programs, how many of our students that currently come to Noctic Valley will depart for the Tunxus campus, and what will that do in terms of the enrollment on our campus and our ability to offer courses on our campus? No one's looked at that possibility, that when you spread these boutique programs out across the entire state, that you could end up with a situation where you don't have enough students at any campus to offer any of the courses. And no one's looked at that. And that's a huge problem. And I mentioned that, and they said that they would keep an eye on it, but it really wasn't anything that the faculty needed to be concerned about.
This is access in name only, right? Like just like that workflow exists on paper only. So I could be enrolled in a college that allows me that allows me all of these different majors, even though they're completely inaccessible to me, right? Especially if people like in the northwest corner of the state and so on, the transportation's not there. There's also, there for folks who have been paying attention to the actual content, some of these proposals contain course content that is so inappropriate or outdated that it is surprising to believe that someone who's qualified to teach the course actually prepared it. And we also know that they won't tell us who's working on the courses unless we're working on it. So, I mean, 40-something people working on 24 programs is not an impressive number. And I think that the existence of that workflow allows everybody to defer to someone else, and it could be the case that the only people who have looked closely at these things is 2, and it doesn't matter how qualified you are. 2 people is just not enough. I think that that we should probably prepare something that just simply speaks to the reality of the situation, despite the existence of this workflow, and maybe address that officially in January. Just so that we have it documented, so that it's understood that this isn't the process that we're following. All right.
I think it would be helpful, Kalina, too, that once if we do make a statement on this, that we send a copy to NETCHI, because that is they are sending their proposal to NETCHI in January, and I think it should be accompanied with a statement from the faculty, from this body in particular.
Yeah. All right, so we'll have to really do some work to find out exactly what's going on at which colleges, so that we can address it sort of thoroughly. In terms of okay. Where is our agenda? There it is. Okay. So let's see. Oh, so there's something brand new. There's something called a Nexus degree that has been introduced into the system. Nothing is being offered yet. It'll be up to the individual institutions if they want to make use of this brand new degree type. You can find the description of it on page 241 of the ASA agenda. It aims to sort of be more, I believe, sort of work experience focused, and apparently it's the first new degree type since 1890. And I'm going to get this, I always forget what we call, is it Georgia State University System of Georgia, whatever. They were the first to offer it, and then the first graduates with this degree were last fall. So it's a whole brand new thing that just is now, it's holding a space in the system so that institutions can decide whether or not they want to make use of this kind of degree. Ron, is your hand up? Okay. And then there is a new center also that might be of interest at Western. It's Connecticut Center for School Safety and Crisis Preparation, and it prepares Western students and alumni for serving that need in the state of being prepared for when there are sort of school safety crises and so on, of responding to that need. So that's something new, and it's currently funded by Connecticut General Assembly. I think they gave them a $2 million grant. So in the short run, that's how that will be funded. At the level of legislature, so there's a new community college caucus, and its first meeting was on Monday. It was well attended. I think there were about 35 legislators there for the majority of the time. I presented, so did Fran and Ron and Lois, as well as some other folks from the system. And, you know, Jen helped us get straight on PACT, as always, not on PACT, sorry, on ACME and PACT, as always. So that caucus is focused on really addressing, you know, there have been any number of bills in the past few years that addressed the composition of boards, training for the board, any number of other things, legislative approval for mergers and closings, and they will be looking towards what sorts of things are appropriate for this upcoming short session. So that is in the works. And I also want to draw our attention to, I don't know how many of us are aware of Higher Education Labor United. I know that we've briefly talked about it before. I'm going to put a link to it in the chat. But this was a sort of Scholars for a New Deal for Higher Ed. We had, oh goodness, what did her name just fly? Jen Middlestat with us at the FAC conference last year, and she is a member of Scholars for a New Deal. I have since joined their governing board, but out of the sort of legislation that they facilitated with Bernie Sanders and Jayapal, Representative Jayapal, there was a labor summit in the summer, and that work continues. The group that was formed out of the summit is called Higher Education Labor United. And the idea is that there needs to be more work at the federal level of sort of weighing in on higher education policy in a way that is really informed by the folks that work on the ground with students, right? Because, for example, we see that many states, it's very much a race to the bottom, right? What we face in Connecticut is happening everywhere. Everyone has had significant reductions to their funding since, you know, about 2008 or so. So there needs to be encouragement in another direction. And the best way that we know of capturing federal dollars to support our higher ed initiative is shifting more and more of the burden of cost towards our students. So if we could figure out other ways where the incentive system actually pushes us in a different direction where it's actually functioning better for students, so that we don't leave them with debt, and so that we don't have to keep raising their tuition to capture those dollars. It would be really helpful. So there's going to be another summit, I believe, sometime in the beginning of next semester. And it's worth kind of keeping track of what's going on there, because it's very interesting and sort of a good group of folks across the country thinking through the best ways to structure this policy. All right, I think that's all I will report on. Maybe I'll tell you about my foolishness at old and new business. Yeah, should we do that, David? And all right, I will kick it to Jen Long now for an update on, well, not an update. You can describe it, Jen. Thoughts about PACT.
Okay. Hi, everyone. So about 6 weeks ago, I was talking to the folks in my faculty senate at Three Rivers about some of the unintended consequences of PACT and how, as advisors, we can best help students. And I was thinking about what Fran noted with one of the earlier presenters about how advisors there's so many issues of what we don't know. So what we did as a Senate was we came up with a few questions about PACT questions, and we contacted our director of financial aid and we asked him some questions. We had a meeting with the person on our campus who does the accommodations paperwork for students with disabilities, and our registrar, and also the financial aid director. And the director stated that we needed to reach out to Dr. Allison Buckley, who's the vice president for enrollment management and student affairs, and ask her these questions. So we went back and chatted after the meeting, and we just kept coming up with a series of questions. Things like, how does an advisor let a PACT student know when the census date is and when they should withdraw from classes, and et cetera, et cetera. And as I was thinking, I sort of said, well, shouldn't this be an issue we bring to the FAC? Because wouldn't it be great if on every campus, faculty raised their concerns about PACT, and we could generate one document that had a list of all of our questions, so we could figure out how to best advise students and look at these unintended consequences, and then maybe invite Dr. Buckley to an FAC meeting so we could all ask her those questions. So how I envisioned this going would be to share some of the questions we posed at Three Rivers, to see if you all have interest in taking the document back to your campuses, to your faculty senates, and asking folks if they want to add additional questions. Then I can collect all of the questions and organize it into a comprehensive list. We could edit it together. I could send it off to Dr. Buckley so she has the questions in advance, and then she could come to our meeting to answer any outstanding questions, so we can see what the impact will be on PACT for some of these students. So I'll give you just some examples. I know for me as an academic advisor, most of my students come to me when registration opens for the next semester. I don't reach out to every one of my students 30 days into classes and help them figure out what to drop early on. I just don't have the time to do it. I have a lot of advisees. And so if you don't know who's in PACT, how the student can figure out what money they're getting from PACT, and let them know, I think 30 days in is the census, that they should drop the classes they can't handle to make up to do well in the other classes. If you don't communicate that to your advisee, they might get to the end of the semester and suddenly they can't drop 1 or 2 classes and then make up the difference. So in some of these instances, there are pretty strict academic guidelines that students have to follow to maintain the PACT dollars. The PACT dollars are minimal. So the state collects the financial aid from the student. The state gives them maybe $250, and then they're stuck in the situation where they have to take 12 credits and they have to keep a certain GPA. I got different information from Dr. Buckley than we got from our financial aid advisor in terms of what is good academic standing. And if we as advisors don't know how to inform students what the process is to keep them fully in the loop, there's going to be a lot of disconnects here. I also can say that on my campus, the person who does the accommodations paperwork for all underprepared students, he's only one person. And many of my students, I'm like 4 to 6 weeks into the semester before they get me their paperwork. So students can opt out of the 12 credits for PACT and into fewer credits if they get accommodations paperwork. How reasonable is that if we don't have the staff to process the paperwork for the accommodations in the meantime, right? So these are some examples of questions that came up. It looks like good academic standing is called satisfactory academic progress, meaning they need 67% of their credits at a 2.0. One person said they can drop 1 3-credit class. Another person said that they can drop 2. So there's a lot of mixed messages and miscommunication about this program. So what I did was I generated a document that I started with the initial questions we posed from Three Rivers. I put Dr. Buckley's information at the top, the link to the PACT website. And what I'd like to do is see if there's any interest for all of you to pass these questions along to your faculty senate chairs, see if at the next Senate meeting, if you all want to discuss adding to these questions, and then get the information back to me and we can decide if it's worth following up with Dr. Buckley. So that's kind of my brief overview of where I am with things. I can certainly just do it as a campus and report back to FAC and tell you where we are. But I thought it would raise awareness of some of these concerns if we all talked about it on each campus and more than likely come up with stronger questions to ask. So that's all I got so far. Did that help, Kalina? I don't know if that was fine. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Jen.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Lois.
I think that's a good idea, Jen. I like that. I do have one question though. Has anybody just asked her why we aren't being given this information as standard operating procedure?
Well, that was the question that I asked my financial aid director. Only one person from my campus emailed her directly and she got right back to them. But I think that is one of the main questions we should ask, because every campus now has these guided pathways advisors. And every time I've asked someone who is a guided pathways advisor specific questions, their answer is generally, well, we'll have a meeting and talk about it, but they never hold a meeting with me. And I feel like the faculty advisors are left in the dark and I can't figure out why.
But
so we do have to
shouldn't
get,
we just, I'm sorry, Jen, but shouldn't we just be given this information? So when we talk to students in general, we're giving them correct information?
well,
What is-
I think the information should be on the PACT website clearly spelled out, and it's not. If you look at it, it's very vague. It states that students can do an unlimited number of appeals, but then I found out that it's up to the discretion of the BOR for what happens. I don't think students realize how little funding they're actually making up. The state is making up in the difference for the tuition. It's generally only about $250. So why in the world would you sign up for something that's going to give you all of these difficult parameters for an extra $250 when you could just use your financial aid? And then the other thing is, if it's true that they can only withdraw from 1 3-credit class, then what will happen to the students in 6-credit math and 6-credit English, when that's too much of a course load for most students, and then they can't even drop one of them? So it's very interesting. And then why put the burden of unlimited appeals on a student in the first place? That doesn't seem reasonable. What is the appeal process? How much work is that going to be for each advisor to have to constantly do an appeal for all of these students when this is, rolled out to scale? So I agree. I think that's the big thing we should push them on is, and what's going to be the burden for faculty to reach out to students early in the semester to say, if you're in PACT, do not withdraw before the census date or you have to pay all your money back. If it's after the census date, you can withdraw from this course. And it's going to be a whole nother level of advising on top of helping students register for courses. So I don't know. I think if we all put our heads together, we can come up with great questions, and then I can do the legwork of organizing it so nothing's redundant, and then send it to you guys if you're interested. Do you guys think this is something your Senate would like to discuss?
I do, yes.
Okay. All righty, then I will, Helena, I'll send a draft to you of the questions that I have and a little blurb at the top of what we could send to the FAC rep to send to their faculty senate chairs. And I can either send it to the rep or I can send it to the chairs to discuss and get back to me. We can figure that out, like what the best process is. But I'm thinking timeline wise, we'll probably ask for people to present this and the next time they have a meeting, which might not be till spring, and then hopefully in early spring invite Dr. Buckley to one of our meetings. But I don't want to blindside her, so I would give her the questions in advance, and if she just replies in writing, that's fine too. We'll just need the answers. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks so much, Jen. This is great. All right. So next is FAC elections. Do you want to take that too, Jen or Lois?
Sure. Okay, so we're going to do the elections electronically, and the plan is for, well, Lois is going to do such a great job on SurveyMonkey creating the the voting mechanism for us. And we're planning to meet Monday to figure out, what the process is. And I'm going to be drafting an email to the faculty senate chairs, asking them to do the election within a certain time frame. And then I guess probably Lois will just get the results back in the survey that she generated. And that's the plan, to get this completed before the end of the year.
Yep. So cool. That's it. I just maybe just remember to give we'll let you know when they're out to governance chairs, and make sure to give your governance chairs a heads up if you're not the one. All right, thank you. So yes, Deb is here with us. So the next topic is the CSCU Online Learning Council. This was on the agenda in October, but we kind of put it off a little bit so we could hear from Deb or Mike. And the link is on the agenda if you want to take a look at it. Deb, do you want to start discussion on this?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. So this issue was something that we noted in an email from the system office back in maybe October or so. And it just raised some red flags in that we were concerned about the way that it looked like the committee was being comprised. So I'll just do a kind of a quick review of that for those of you who may not recall this or may not have noticed it in the first place. So it was calling for, at the time, various goals for the council to kind of bring into alignment online learning, including policy, process, and service/support areas. There were a lot of other goals that were mentioned, and group membership looked as if it was very slanted in the direction of administration. So it had as group membership executive director digital learning, CSCU facilitator, director of career and transfer readiness, CSCU, chief information officer, CSCU or designee, one CAO or designee from a CSCU university with online programming, one CAO or designee from Charter Oak State College, and the AVP of Teaching and Learning from CSCC. After that, a call did go out to invite people to apply for serving on the committee. And there was a very large group of faculty who had applied for and who were selected. I guess not everyone was selected, but a large number of faculty were selected to serve on the committee. I think somewhere around 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 20, something like 30 members to serve on the committee. So I did some follow-up with this with one of the individuals who's serving on the committee, who's Heidi Lockwood. She's also the FERC representative from Southern. And I trust Heidi in terms of just looking out for faculty interests and making sure that this is not an administratively dominated committee. And what Heidi informed me, so this actually made me feel a lot better. And from our point of view, I think probably this can go off the agenda, or just kind of be followed in the future. But what Heidi said is that the committee has met just once this semester and has a meeting set up for December 14th. She said that the review of the applications was conducted by Kevin Corcoran, who's the AVP of Digital Learning for the system. However, at the first meeting, he asked them to think about who was not represented and who should be represented. And they felt that the agenda items that were mentioned by the individuals who were at the meeting were accurately represented in the agenda, in the next agenda. The goals of the committee have not been set up yet. However, the two chairs of the committee there's going to be one chair from the community colleges and one chair from the CSUs. And in terms of the agenda for the meeting that will be taking place, so the chair is Adam Brewer from Western and Adrienne Dunham, CSCC. And the agenda items are just at this point very broad. And as I said, I think it bears just keeping an eye on it. Talking about readiness and success, current practices, processes, requirements, credit awards, etc., orientation, retention, etc., qualifications and standards, infrastructure, services, strategy, collaboration, and culture. So that's about all I know about the committee and what's happening with it right now. But I did feel more comfortable when I saw that it is comprised for the most part of faculty members, that faculty seem to be setting the agenda, and it is co-chaired by faculty.
Did you say Adrienne Dunham was co-chair?
That's what I heard.
She's not faculty.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure about that because, yeah, that was confusing to me. I can check on that. Heidi
I know
said
she's not faculty. She's
yeah,
not.
no, I'm not disputing that. I'm just saying that in one of her emails, Heidi had said that the committee was to be co-chaired by one CSU and one CCSU, one community college, one CSU. And then that didn't match up. So I will follow through on that. So who is she?
She was the education director of educational technology at Tunxis, and she now serves on. She's now I don't even know what her title is for the college that will go unnamed.
Yeah, I will check on that. But yeah, that definitely contradicts what Heidi had originally said. And I'll ask her to clarify that at the next meeting. So does anyone know of any, has anyone followed this issue? Is anyone aware of anything in addition to this or different from this?
David, you have a hand?
Yeah. Well, I was on a working group for online programs that Kevin Corcoran initiated. And this was just before the pandemic and just as it broke out. And I was representing CCSU. The president of CCSU had asked me to be on it because I'd previously been on Connecticut State University system committees on online learning. And I basically, this was, I don't want to go over the details of what happened there. I think at some point I actually circulated around a document that I prepared to members of the FAC, but I may not have done that. But in any case, this was a committee which was actually run by 4 staff from Blackboard. And they were trying to figure out, based on a regional study of the Northeast of the United States, including New York State, what are the programs which should be offered online? And that already was problematic because they really didn't know what was being offered already at the universities and community colleges. And of course, the region of comparison was way too large. That said, the problems which I saw there, which may recur here, are first of all, a failure to distinguish between online programs and courses offered at the community college level and those offered at the university level, particularly as concerns programs, since the research requirements and others may be different at the university level. Secondly, there was no effort made to understand the failure of two previous attempts at centralized offering, control, or supervision, as the case may be, of online programs, namely Online CSU, which existed from about 2008 to 2010, and which failed because it did not attract the 80% of students from outside the state, but rather 90% of the students were from in-state, and most of them are already from CSU universities, so that its initial market expectations were not met. And also the Connecticut Distance Learning Consortium, which Kevin Corcoran himself was the executive director of, which was housed at Charter Oak and was abandoned approximately in 2017. And so I had wanted to know, what were the reasons for the failure of those two previous efforts to have something like what was being proposed, an Office of Online Programs for the CSU system. So those were the two issues I had. Distinguishing between programs offered at the community college and university level, and understanding the failures of previous efforts for something like what was being proposed. It's not exactly the same thing, but something like it. So I was skeptical. But I don't know, I don't have any further information on this new council. So I'm dependent upon what has just been said.
Yeah, and I mean, there are a lot of initiatives that are going on. We've got the Google thing going on, the Amazon thing going on at Southern, and I know at Central. I don't know about other institutions. We've got something called Mind Edge, which is a contract with an outside entity that just kind of slipped its way into and is being presented as a Southern online program. So clearly the online what's been going on with online offerings is out of the hands of faculty and somewhat out of control. We find out about these initiatives when we read them either in the news or we get sent an email from the system office on them. So honestly, I don't know how this particular initiative aligns with all of these other different initiatives, but how do you think that the FAC could possibly address these issues and in order to try to bring some clarity, some transparency to, again, all of these online initiatives that seem to be circulating out there?
Yeah, I think that's something that we could do at the FAC. I mean, I could probably, assume part of that responsibility. And I think we have to distinguish between coordination and sharing of experiences, where I think there is a role for the central level, because Eastern may be doing something interesting that I don't know about at Central, and how else might it be communicated to me? I mean, something like this council might be a positive way of doing that. I think we just have to distinguish between coordination and communication on the one hand, and command and control on the other. And when it slips from the former to the latter, that's where the problem arises. And that illusion almost necessarily comes about at the system level, for whom, everything, as they say about the hammer, everything, from the point of view of hammer, everything looks like a nail. From the point of view of the system office, everything, including actual problems which they identify and which I think they have a legitimate role in identifying, it all looks like something that they should take over. And so that tendency, I think, has to be opposed. And that's maybe what we can do. Find out what can be done in terms of augmenting communication and coordination, and what can be done to prevent command and control.
I mean, is the most efficient way of figuring this out inviting someone who is leading us to come talk to us about what the goal is? I mean, for me, I think part of it is just that in our role as advising the board, that is our supposed function, though it is not the function that we currently are able to fulfill. we should be as informed as anyone of like the sort of general overarching long-term goals and sentiments and priorities of this system. And that is something that has been sorely lacking, right? Understanding, like you said, there's the Amazon, there's the Google, and those things can be good in a context that is where they are a small part, but if they're the only initiatives, right, or if they're somehow indicative of what this group and we have no way to make sense of what is actually happening. So it would be really good to have a conversation about like what role these initiatives play, what role this work group plays in a larger vision for the system. I think we haven't had the chance to have that conversation. So if we could identify the right person to talk to have that conversation, I think that might be helpful.
Yeah, that's Kevin Corcoran.
That would be, well, is it Kevin
That's
Corcoran?
the person to invite, yes.
Kevin Corcoran's role, it seems to me, is to facilitate the online stuff. But I'm very curious about what role that plays in the larger.
Oh, well.
So maybe Kevin Corcoran and someone else that can answer both of those questions.
Well, what about Adam Brewer, who is who's one of the co-chairs?
That sounds good. All right, so let's look to do that in January. Okay, sounds great. Thank you for sort of framing that, Deb.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Okay. Now what did we put? We put the conference on as an addition here. Mary Beth, any chance you want to speak to that? We have not made a lot of progress in this area, and I actually sort of almost purposely left it off because we need to start talking to each other about who wants to take responsibility for this year. And I have not yet had a conversation or reached out in any way to Jane Gates. You know, for many years, this was sponsored, at least in part, by the system office. The largest, segment of the funding came from the system office. Last year, we were told that we wouldn't have any funding, but we were able to carry on because we were virtual and because our union supported us, and it was actually a really great event. This year, not quite sure how we want to move forward, so it's worth a discussion. Do you want to jump in here, Mary Beth?
I mean, I was just curious. I mean, I think by this point last year we had at least selected a date so we could get like save the dates out or something like that. I just didn't know. I just figured it would be worth a conversation in terms of, I think we had started maybe talking about it last time, in terms of whether we were thinking about, another virtual event or an in-person event. And I think that also largely depends on the financial situation. Because I think, an in-person event certainly would be more costly than, a virtual event would be. So I was just sort of curious as to what the thoughts were, on that and how we were going to go forward with that.
Any thoughts? I will put out the ask immediately after this meeting to find out where we stand with funding from the system. And you're absolutely right, we're way behind schedule. But go ahead, Carmen.
Yeah, I'm kind of new to the committee. What's the goal of the conference?
So this is, oh goodness, what year is it? Are we 5 or 6 years in? It had to be canceled because it was supposed to be an in-person event in 2020. But it has been functioned as the only system-wide conference for many years. And it's on shared governance and student success, I think, is the stated goal of the conference. And so it usually happens every year, usually in the first week of April.
Okay.
Yeah, and has been hosted at different institutions for many years, and last year it was just on online.
All right, thanks.
How much interest is there in, because the main reason that we've kind of slowed down on this is that we do need someone to take responsibility for it. It can't be me or David. It's just not going to be possible next semester. And it can be quite time consuming. There are a few of us on this committee who have some experience, and I'm sure we can recruit folks who are not on the committee currently, who have participated in the past and have that knowledge, right? So I'm sure that there will be support moving forward, but we do need someone to be able to take this responsibility. And it has been one hell of a year for most of us. I think most of us are shying away from that. That said, we do have some ideas for some really interesting things that we could do. And it could be a non-standard sort of conference. It could even be, I mean, a collaboration on different ideas of different areas of research that we might need. Like I said, there are people who are very interested in talking about the kinds of data collection that would be necessary for us to really move in an informed way of serving the needs of these schools, right? That's one idea. So maybe we can continue to talk in the background and someone can take responsibility, but we should at least establish whether there's a willingness, a desire to get this, to make this happen. Because we've been very lucky to have it in the past. It has been a really great forum. We've had some amazing speakers. We had Johanna Hayes one year. We had, our speakers last year I thought were excellent. So it is, it's a lot of work, but I think can be very, sort of a refreshing thing to do in the spring. Yes, Pam.
Just a quick question. Where did the funding come from in past years prior to my arrival last year?
It's usually, the provost usually forwards that funding. So it's usually from Gates. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're going to reach out to Ken Kluznik.
Okay.
Jane is retired.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure it wasn't me.
Is she out at the end of the year, or is it official now?
I believe officially her last day is the end of the year. But she's had so much built up vacation time and such that we don't expect her at the board meeting next Thursday.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
All right. I've promised to bug people offline before. I'm going to do it again because I know I want to look forward to this conference. I just know I can't make it happen by myself. So let's see if we can get that together. Are there any ideas? You don't have to take on responsibility for any work. Any other ideas about the preferred format, a topic? Yeah, David.
Well, I hesitated to put my hand up here, but I got really interested based on that special board meeting last month on alternatives to consolidation. That is to say, other ways of organizing communication and coordination amongst constituent institutions other than through outright removal of their accreditation and their supplanting by a single institution run from a central office. So that might be, that's just a topic. And the concept that comes to my mind is the famous system of systems. It's a legitimate concept out there, which has been used very successfully by people as diverse as the US military in coordinating its air, land, and sea operations and major engineering projects, especially in information technology. It's a legitimate concept. I don't know who we would get to do a presentation on it, but there are lots of people working on precisely that, because for a large scale, complex project or institution, that is a way to go. And it combines the two nice aspects of, on the one hand, maintaining autonomy of constituent units, and on the other hand, bringing about some communication, cooperation, and coordination, which really makes the constituent units more effective. On the other hand, I'm not volunteering to do it.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I had planned to mention that about the caucus meeting. One of the speaker or the presenters was a pair from New Mexico, Tracy Hartzler, who is the president of the largest college in their system, and Kathy Bari, I think I said that right, who runs a consortium that is run by a board, and the board is composed by the presidents of all the institutions who have an interest in finding some sort of shared service model where they can facilitate the smaller institutions in being able to offer things that they couldn't before, but also to minimize costs and create efficiencies. And what was really interesting to me about the way that they are doing it is that it began from the bottom up. It's entirely shaped by the presidents, the leaders of the system, and they have not forced anyone out. They have not reduced their power. In fact, this now becomes its own very powerful system where they are attempting to create something that works so efficiently that other institutions buy into it. So this is, if you think about the incentive system in our system, we have this like monopoly on the shared services, and then it either works or it doesn't, but you're stuck with it. And there's not enough input coming directly from our CEOs because those folks no longer answer to them. Their system is completely different. So that's just one. And they have built their system so that the goals for the kinds of independence and non-independence that they want to have in that system, they're building their information systems to facilitate that, right? So we've been told that, well, the big problem is that how you use financial aid at 2 different colleges if you wanted to, which is sort of a non-issue. We only 1.2% of our students actually do that. We can find workarounds. We've thought through several workarounds. It's easy to implement. But even if you wanted, for whatever reason, to maximize that, the way that they've done it is very interesting, but they've built it in so that any student who gets a number at one college gets a number at all colleges, so that all of that can happen without a problem. So that any course that's offered at any single college can also be shared across other colleges, so that if there are not enough people to fill a course in one, you can share it. And again, it's built to facilitate the goals that they have for actual courses and students, as opposed to our courses and student services being an outcome of the limitations of our services. So that is a lot of fun to think about, and it's not the only way, clearly. So it would be nice to have, maybe we could invite various different folks to talk about the various different solutions that would allow us to put forward some kind of recommendation, because I think up until now, the only thing we've really been able to do is talk about what the limitations or the goals might be, but we might be able to put forward some concrete sorts of recommendations.
Well, there's a pathway.
It is, yeah. All right, folks. I'll let y'all off the hook for now, which is for now. And let's move on to the issue of COVID. So we have been told very clearly that our participation in advising on COVID policy has come to an end. I shared with you that letter from Jane Gates to David, but I'm just noticing that there's more and more anxiety about the lack and the discrepancy between the way that policy is enforced at the universities and the way that it's enforced at the colleges. And you can see it very clearly in the numbers that went out this morning of the level at which folks are actually vaccinated or whatever at the universities versus the colleges. And there's a big difference. The universities have a tracking system, they have the software, we do not, and nothing has been offered. So it's while we could wait until the beginning of the semester to see what is provided, we've been behind, we've been scrambling to keep up with this crisis for a couple of years now. And it might be worth a conversation ahead of time whether or not our input is welcome. And I know, David, you have a resolution from CCSU that you might want to share, and Lois, I know you might want to weigh in. So go ahead.
Lois, do you want to go first? Or do you want me? Oh, you're
muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, I am muted. I've been, I've been kind of arguing about this for over a year now, especially with the unions, about the fact that we need to mandate vaccines, and at the community colleges where our students only have to check off on a piece of paper whether or not they've been vaccinated, versus the university students who have to actually prove they've been vaccinated, which makes no sense whatsoever to me. And there's the statement that we don't have the software that the state universities have. Well, too bad. Then we need to get the software the state universities have. And so I think we have to get in line with that. Should we, Colina, say anything about the union or not? I don't know. Hearsay has it that one of the larger unions is probably going to come out with a statement that is going to say something along those lines. Faculty, staff, and students should be required to be vaccinated, and they should have proof of vaccination. And if not, they should be tested weekly, and so on and so forth. That's as far as I can go with that, I guess. Right, Kalina?
Mm-hmm. David's been insisting on the withdrawal of the non-medical exemptions for a while. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, can I share my screen?
Yep, you should have access.
Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
So this was the resolution that we passed at Central. And I'll note, in the whereases, we're basing ourselves on the email which President Terrence Chang sent to the community on November the 1st. I'm fully in agreement with him on this point, on 2 points, really. First of all, he stressed that our overall goals are to, 1, decrease the number of students who have not attested to their vaccination status. And I assume that attestation means actually proving in the sense that Lois just discussed. Secondly, to decrease the number of non-medical exemptions wherever possible. And 3, to continue to impose consequences for non-compliance. And President Chang continued, this continuous improvement will take place at the campus level, allowing flexibility to address concerns based on local conditions. And he indicated that the mandate for local leadership is to, 1, review and work to reduce the non-medical exemptions provided to students, and 2, continue to impose consequences for non-compliance for those students that have not attested to their vaccination status or have been granted exemptions but have not consistently reported for weekly testing. So I think I'm fully in agreement with that, and so is our university senate. And our resolution was in 4 parts, or maybe 5. One was an educational campaign to use our students, especially those students in nursing, biology, biomolecular sciences, communication, and other fields, to produce social media products to encourage students by having other students explain to them the benefits, in addition to the information campaign and the educational measures that the university itself is already doing, including a very good signage policy. You can't walk into a building at Central without being confronted with at least 3 signs about vaccination and precautions relative to COVID. Secondly, there was information and data that we wanted Although some of that has been supplied in the weekly statements from the CSU system, we really wanted to know the rate of vaccination for students, but also for faculty and staff, the number of medical and percentage of medical exemptions granted, the number of non-medical and percentage of non-medical exemptions granted, the rate of ongoing random screening for residential and commuter students and the results of those screenings, and the current and ongoing overall positivity rate of the CCSU community. Translate that, it's the campus at which you're at. For medical exemptions, we just simply added that it must be accompanied by a statement of the medical reason and an attestation by a licensed medical provider. That may already be what is happening. But on the non-medical exemptions, we said it's consistent with the statist objective of reducing non-medical exemptions, that is to say, President Cheng's statement. The ideal would be eliminating the category completely, and that is what we had originally proposed in our FAC resolution working group last year to the executive committee, but that was modified to allow for non-medical exemptions. But short of that, CCSU must require all applicants for non-medical exemptions a statement of their reason for requesting the exemption. Now that's a special concern at CCSU, where for various reasons, the box which was on the CSCU form, where you tick off, I am asking for an exemption, and then you had to give your reason, that box was removed, but only at CCSU. So this was a particular requirement that we wanted for our university. And the reason for that was that the administrators looking after this had been, I guess, somewhat distressed by the lack of guidance from the system office as to what are the criteria for accepting or rejecting requests. And consequently, it had been interpreted at CCSU, and I believe at the other universities as well, as all requests have to be automatically accepted. And the folks at CCSU were unwilling to actually give their approval to ridiculous statements that students might put into that box. That said, we want that box restored. And we went on to say a committee of designated individuals to determine whether an application is to be accepted or not, based on the following criteria. The first one was we wanted to eliminate all personal objections, such as fear of needles, distrust of government, or reasons based on misinformation. For example, claims that aborted cells were used in producing the vaccine, or the vaccines are too new and untested. We wanted those uniformly rejected. Secondly, even though the state now does not allow religious objections for MMR for grade schools, that law has not been extended to the universities. So if there are to be religious objections, they certainly should be allowed for members of religions that explicitly preclude medical treatment and their basic tenets, for example, Christian Scientists, but also accompanied by an attestation by a minister of that religion. And the third level was a may be allowed. Religious exemptions may be allowed for other individuals, but must be 1, accompanied by a statement of strongly held religious belief, 2, an attestation by a registered minister of that religion, and 3, be subject to a meeting with the student to discuss this issue and its implications. That's, for example, what they do at Yale. They do allow strongly held religious objections, but they meet with the student, and very often, apparently, the result is that the student changes their mind. The fifth one was enforcement for noncompliance, and we just wanted measures short of expulsion that would be increasing for failure to comply. That is to say, first you have a warning, but then there has to be further and stronger sanctions, including barring from on-campus events, seeking on-campus services, a health hold on resolution, up to including suspension, but we didn't think that expulsion, we thought that was too extreme for repeat violators. And we added that students barred from campus until they return to compliance cannot demand online material or online meetings not already provided by the courses for which they are registered. To avoid the problem, should the sanction go to exclusion from on-campus participation, that a student can simply say, okay, I don't want to get vaccinated. I want this instructor who is not offering an online course, then I'll offer me an online course. Point 6 was booster vaccination. We recommended it based on the current FDA and CDC guidelines. And we thought it should be mandated once their efficacy against new variants has been established and there's appropriate guidance from federal, state, and system levels. And then there were some miscellaneous issues, increasing the number of on-campus vaccinations. Actually, Central has been very good about that and has had a number of clinics. Secondly, increase the number of portable ventilation systems in classrooms, accelerating the upgrade of building ventilation systems, continuing the mask mandate, and continuing contact tracing, but inform, without specifying the individuals involved, faculty and staff of infections among those they have encountered in their classes or offices. And that was approved nearly unanimously. I think there was one vote against it at the University Senate. A lot of this could be taken over for a resolution on our part, and I excuse myself for being remiss in not having sent this out in advance.
I apologize too, David. You did send it to me and I didn't forward or anything. Yeah. So this morning was not the first time I heard reports of folks who say that their students openly discuss the fact that they checked the box and laugh about it and they're not vaccinated. So this morning's report was of someone who was sitting in, who apparently has been sharing a classroom with a student the entire semester. And then that was announced, right? I don't know. I know that there a situation at Northwestern, Mike?
Yes.
That isn't covered by the kinds of categories that's in this resolution, or no?
Yeah, I'm not sure. We'd have to look at it, but to David's point, we've had several people, well, to your point too, Kalina, we had several students actually out themselves and say that they lied on the forms and they did not get vaccinated and didn't file for the exemption. I don't know. I would have to look at the paperwork for the other question you had.
Okay.
And I would add, I'm just surprised that the community colleges don't have access to the software. I mean, through HERE3, through the various higher education relief funds, more than $350 million came to the CSU system. About 45% of that going to student aid, but the rest of it going to institutional aid. Getting the right sort of software going should have been one of the priorities so that we would have at the community colleges the same level of attestation that you have at the universities.
And actually, one of our professors at Northwestern was saying that all we would really need to do is have a JPEG sent in, and the system I would think is more than able to handle a JPEG, right? And but there was other issues. We have visitors coming in, like a high school type of school. I think that rents part of our building there, and so that was part of it where they weren't really. We don't know if they were following the rules to see if there's any exposures, on top of the fact that the building that they're in is one of the worst ventilated buildings, and people have to come to work there, as a side note.
So would it be appropriate to move something like the resolution modified to take just replacing CCSU by individual campuses? What the president of the CSU was saying is that it should be looked after locally, but we can make a suggestion as to what local requirements should be.
I guess I have a couple of questions. One is, David, that resolution is obviously it's geared towards CCSU because it is CCSU, and
Yes.
so you're talking about on residential students as and non-residential students, which the community colleges don't have. So this would have to be reworded a lot, and also and this is my personal feeling. You guys can tell me I'm wrong or not, but I think this needs to apply to employees of the college as well as students.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I know. Go ahead, Mary Beth.
I was just going to say, I think, if it is going to be reworded to, fit with the community colleges, I think it would be reasonable to put a statement in there saying that we believe that the vaccination cards should be collected. There should be actual proof of vaccination as opposed to just a box that students are checking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also think that there might be a need to discuss like how we navigate our relationship with the community. I know at least at one college, the college is the testing spot for the community. So there are people coming in to be tested constantly in one of the most populated buildings on that campus, and there's a lot of discomfort about that. So having a sort of decision-making process that includes the advice, the guidance of the people who actually are in those buildings would be helpful. So there's the possibility of modifying or endorsing resolution. There's the possibility of doing a much more general statement, and I think you have some suggestions, Lois. And then there's also the possibility of if we think we need more thought, of asking a small subcommittee to draft something a little bit more detailed, and we meet for a dedicated, like 5 minutes, come in, discuss, vote meeting sometime between now and our next scheduled meeting, which is I think the 21st of January. Lois, do you
want, can you share it, or do you want me to?
Can you share it, please?
Yeah, I'm going to stop mine.
Okay, and Carmen, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I noticed, David, I was going to comment on some of the things you had on there on the share screen, but so there's many things that I agree with here. I feel like the students should have to have their cards and pictures taken of the cards. Although, again, the cards, we all know, could also just be made up too, right? Because we do know that definitely happens. And I feel like we should work on reducing non-medical exemptions and so on and so forth. But where I'm going to say it's different is that I'm just not for basically purging students from the college. I'm not really comfortable just saying that you have to get it or you're going to be disenrolled from the college there. I mean, so that's going to be slightly different than what you guys think. I think we should definitely encourage it. I think we should decrease medical exemptions and non-medical exemptions. And I definitely feel like they need to actually show that they actually have it if they attest to that. But I'm just having a daughter who had a side effect from a vaccine that's pretty severe. I'm not comfortable with just saying that everybody has to get this. And because let's face it, there are side effects to this. And so I feel like we should strongly encourage, but not start forcing people educating people, yes, but I'm not comfortable with some of the language there and saying that, booster vaccines, that should be mandated. I'm definitely not comfortable with that at this point either. Obviously, we have to kind of wait to kind of see how they respond to the variants there. Mm-hmm. And this is coming from someone who's been vaccinated twice, and my whole family is vaccinated also. So I'm just going to put that out there. Different viewpoints here.
Carmen, I have 2 questions. So first, are you comfortable with restricting those who can't be fully vaccinated to like online courses only, or do you think that that's too restrictive?
I think that's too restrictive. I mean, the other thing is too, is that we have to face the fact that it's like, just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean you're not going to get it and that you can't transmit it. So it's one thing if it was like pretty foolproof, like if you got chickenpox, you're not going to get it again if you get the vaccine. But it's very clear that you could easily get this being fully vaccinated and boosted. So that's where I'm starting to really have a hard time to say this has to be mandated. Because
the
really, for
transition
me,
is supposed to be less likely with the vaccination. Is that
right,
correct?
right, it's supposed to be less likely, but then they say, well, it can wane. And now we're talking, Pfizer's talking about a fourth booster shot. And I just like, I just think it's starting to go into start a little bit. So I just feel like right now the evidence shows that if you've been vaccinated twice, that you should be pretty well protected against severe COVID hospitalizations. But we definitely know that doesn't mean you're not going to get it. You could get it, it's going to be mild. And that's very, I mean, it's definitely very clear about that. So no, I just don't feel like we should be telling people you can't come on ground classes if you're not vaccinated, at all. So go ahead.
So my other question is, for a situation like the one your daughter's facing, is she able to get something from, like, would that be help? I feel like folks in that situation should have a medical exemption available to them. Has that been the experience?
No, so I mean, in that case, for her, it was another vaccine that she wasn't told the consequences of that, and so she has some severe problems with HPV, but then she got the COVID vaccine, and again, they're just basically recommending her to do it, and then she had some pretty severe complications to that too. So it's like at this point in time, she already has it. So it's not like she has to get a medical exemption at this point because she just went through with it anyway because she just wanted to. But there's consequences to that, and that she's going to live with for the rest of her life. So, and like I said, if it was one thing where because if I'm vaccinated and someone else is not, I don't really know how that's really going to protect me that much. I'm vaccinated. Hopefully, if I get it, then I'm going to be okay. But just saying you have to have it, it's really, we want people to vaccinate because it helps them. If they get COVID, hopefully they won't get really sick. But at this point in time, anyway.
Well, no, Carmen, but this is like, we're public institutions, right? So we have to think about the public health kind of issues. Right. So it might harm, there's a risk of harm to people who take the vaccine, but there's also like known issues with people who have compromised immune systems among the folks who work at the colleges and our students who, if we don't control this, then those students will be restricted to online classes through no choice of their own. And it's exactly. Not about,
that's why I think it's strongly encouraged.
So it is a balance
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's right. So I think it should be strongly encouraged, education, data, so on and so forth. I just feel like when we started having vaccine mandates, even with our country, I feel like I just feel like that's, I don't know. Again, I'm sure no one else agrees with me, and it's fine. You can go ahead and take your vote. This is what I feel. So.
Oh, I have one more question. Sorry. Oh, David has a question also, but the restriction to online classes for only as long as this continues to be a pressing public health issue, right? So not forever, but this is right now a crisis that actually puts everybody at risk, including people who might. It doesn't even matter if it's COVID that you catch. If you go to an overcrowded hospital because you're in a car accident, you're at greater risk if this is out of control. So even the restriction for only as long as the crisis exists, is that something that you might entertain? Or
yeah, I guess that would be fine. Or the student could just stop going to school for a while if they need a class that only is offered on ground, right?
Okay, so as long as it's contained, but not forever, you have to have this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like so. Yeah, I mean, plus you guys, if you take a vote anyway, I'm just telling you my point of view. So you can make
that informs, like I was not, even just the situation with your daughter, I think like informs the way I'm thinking about this. So thank you.
Yeah.
David.
Yeah, it was just a question of, I don't think that the mandate forces people to be vaccinated. It, however, requires them either to be vaccinated or to have an exemption. And if they have an exemption, it requires that they be tested.
Right.
So I think that's an important distinction to make. Right. And I must say, originally I was opposed to any non-medical exemptions, and I've sort of modified my position a little bit, in part because of just the realities around us, to allow for those restricted religious objections from denominations which preclude medical intervention, or for individuals with strongly held religious beliefs that are further attested to and which have been discussed with them. And so that gives a lot of opportunities, both for medical exemptions and for legitimate and much more restricted non-medical exemptions. And I think that would be helpful to us, because we also have to remember this is not likely to be the last pandemic, right? Those of us who were around for SARS, for the first version of it, I was on a sabbatical at McMaster University in Hamilton, just in the immediate aftermath of that. And Hamilton was one of the cities in Canada which was most affected. And believe me, people still were taking a lot of precautions, but then it was only limited to a very small population. This second one is global, but and is fatal, as we know, in millions of cases. Who knows what the next one is going to be? So we do need to be prepared. I think. I mean, one of the things is worst case scenario, preemptive or preventive thinking. But I think that in this case, we can have a properly crafted. I mean, I agree with Kalina. There should be a committee formed to specifically modify this relative to the needs of the community colleges. It looks to me like the universities are being relatively well served at this point. There does seem to be a significant problem at the level of the community colleges. And so I think, a committee, a subcommittee, or a working group should be formed, as we did, when we originally proposed the mandate, to report back either to a special meeting or to the next regular meeting of the FAC. So I'll leave that up to Kalina to sort of organize. I'd be willing to serve on that.
Is that a motion then? I think that's
Sure.
That's something we should do.
That sounds like a motion to me.
Okay. All right. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on how we should move forward with that? And any volunteers for this? Yeah, go ahead, Fran.
Yeah, I like the idea of a subcommittee and a very quick meeting to discuss and probably endorse the recommendations between now and the next FAC meeting. And I'd be happy to serve on that group.
Okay.
I'm ready to do as well.
Okay. So great. So we have continuity since the last work group, and you all can solicit. I'm assuming. I expect Lois will join you, right? Greater membership, a quick meeting, and then based on when you feel ready, we can schedule that special meeting of the FAC to just vote on this recommendation so that it can inform policy going into the spring semester. Sounds good? All right. So all in favor of forming the subcommittee in the expectation of having a special meeting to pass a resolution on this?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Any abstention? Any opposed? Okay, great. All righty. So next on the list is just sort of a discussion of our term. Like for many of us, it's been 2 years together, and they are legitimately the two most tumultuous years that have ever hit higher ed, for sure. And that was the beginning of our term. So I would like to take just a few minutes to kind of reflect on where we've been and what we've done, and in a way that will allow us to inform. There's a lot of overlap, right? A lot of us are moving into the next term also. That will inform an opportunity to think through what our goals will be for the next 2 years, hopefully in January. It has been interesting. So David, is your hand up?
No.
Okay.
Not to start it off. No, thank you.
Okay.
You started.
The only thing I'll say to start it off is that I have thoroughly enjoyed my time with you all, and I think that this is an excellent group. I know that we still have a real struggle ahead of us in terms of figuring out how to actually fulfill our statutory duty, especially concerning our advisory role to the board. I think we made some headway in terms of the other aspect of our duty, which is our advisory role to the legislature, and that is promising. But yeah, just thank you all for being this group while we were going through all this chaos. We certainly were trying to catch up for most of 2020, and the virtual format, I think, has stood in the way to some extent of David and I creating the kinds of relationships that should have facilitated us being able to do that. And I regret that, but I do think that we certainly tried, and we'll continue to try. So as long as we, have this role. So yeah, just want to open it up to anyone who wants to weigh in.
Can you hear me? This is Barbara.
Yeah.
Great. I just want to say I'm going to retire from the system because I'm too old to be coming on campus and they're forcing us to. And that's the only reason. I love this job, but that means I'll be leaving the FAC too. And for me, it's been since 2006. I've been on the previous version of the FAC and then this one, and it's been just fascinating and supportive, and we've accomplished all kinds of things. And I think this is probably the best group I've seen in all that time, this last 2 years. I just think it's a wonderful group with a lot of very good people, knowledgeable and constructive and supportive of each other. And I think the two chairs have been great. So, and in terms of the future, I'm not going to, it's none of my business in some sense, but I just hope we hang on to the core fact of governance, that people, there should be a statewide body, not just after any consolidation, but while the planning is going on. It should be the official body. It should be elected by the campuses, not appointed, not just anybody they can scrape up because everybody else is boycotting it. And it should be called, the cross-college senate or something. There should be, both for curriculum and for general decisions of all kinds, there should be an official body, and we can't fill that role because we're not elected to do that. Our job is something somewhat different from that. That's, for me, that's the eyes on the prize. Makes no sense. All the different things we discuss have to do with the top-down directives from people who don't know what they're doing, and it's dreadful. So, but I certainly wish you luck with it, and I know people are still, it's very clear that all of us and most of our other ground level people are working hard to try to serve the students in spite of all the mess, and that's very cool, but it's too bad that's the position we're in. So thank you all for all the great time together. That's it.
And yeah, and thank you, Barbara. We should be having a celebration at the end of this semester. But but this group is very much something that you've kept together, right? Along with a few others on this in here with us. So yeah, thank you. And we're not losing you, at least, right? Because you are
right.
Now
no, and is Myrna still there?
I am, Barbara. I am. How are you?
Are you retiring? Are you retiring too?
Well, it's not public knowledge, but I'm preparing for it. if you put it that way.
So I hope you're also going to apply for this emeritus idea and, keep in touch with things on this group, because you also have been there for a very, very long time and
I have
been a major contributor, and you served on other committees appointed by this committee and all kinds of things.
Thank you. Thank you for that recognition. I am trying to get the SWOF constituency to nominate another person because of the longevity I have, but it's time for other SWOF members to step up to the plate. But I do really, truly echo everything that Kalina said with regard to you, Steve, Adair, and many of the core groups that really have led us to where we are today. So thank you, and I'm so happy to hear that you're still remaining on the board. You know, there's something to be said for those of you who are historians about keeping the legacy and history so that as you move on with new members, they have at least that concept of where we were,
Yeah.
where we are, and where we're going. So I want to thank you. And I also want to thank our chairs. Our chairs have been fabulous. I can't speak highly enough about both Kalina and Kalina, let me tell you, I know that you took this on, this chair person's position after some seasoned people, right? Left the chair position, and you have stepped up to the plate. You filled those shoes fabulously, and I thank you for all of your leadership, as I do David. But David's always been a leader in my mind because I serve on Senate, and he's very outspoken and speaks to the issues. You know, those issues that people don't want to necessarily talk about. So I also appreciate you and thank you for your leadership. Thank you all, actually. It's been a great, and thank you for allowing us faculty administrators to be part of this forum. This has been really helpful.
Thank you all. And
Kalina, can I say one more thing? It's Barbara again. I just wanted to say I worked really, really hard to find a great replacement to come on from Houstonic, and Matthew Dunn is just fabulous, and he's very knowledgeable. He's involved in all, some of you may know him, he's involved in all kinds of leadership things, and he's on our Senate, which is good in terms of communicating, but he's kind of doing everything. He's just off the scale. He won an award for kind of best teacher in the whole system or some such thing. He's a wonderful guy, so you will love having him, okay?
great. Thank you. Ron.
I just wanted to tell Barbara thank you for everything that she's done for the faculty over all of the years that she's been part of faculty advisory, FAC, and the system. Many telephone calls that she's had with me, and I know with other members of the committee, to sort of give us her wisdom that she's gained all these years. So I just really want to thank you, Barbara, for everything that you've been to the faculty and to the faculty advisory committee. I also want to thank. I also want to thank David and Kalina for the hard, very, very, very hard work. I mean, just sitting through one of those BOR meetings alone, just that one time is hard enough work. And you guys did it monthly. So thank you both for everything you've done. Kalina, I don't think I've ever met anybody who works as hard and is as passionate and brilliant as you are. So thank you so much for all that you've done for the committee as well. So thanks.
David. And thanks, Ron.
Well, I'll be as brief as I can. Certainly, I've been very happy to work with all, especially the community college faculty who I didn't know before. For example, when we met in February of 2020, just before the pandemic started, and Kalina's name was put forward for vice chair, I'd never met her. I think maybe I'd seen her at one of the meetings that I'd attended previously in January. And I was thinking to myself, oh no, this is not going to work. Another philosophy professor, we're going to be at cross purposes. But in fact, I'm quite impressed, and she's done a fantastic job, not just with the faculty advisory committee, but also with the outreach to that group, New Deal for Higher Education, working with the 4Cs and so forth. So I think that's really noteworthy. Have I been disappointed by the effectiveness or lack of effectiveness that we've had at the Board of Regents? Yeah, that's been complicated by the the remote meetings based due to the pandemic, but I certainly had greater hopes for having some influence on board policy than in fact what we've had. We did have, I think, a significant success with the vaccine policy. We've met other problems with respect to the major issues, especially concerning consolidation. And I'm hopeful that we can supply and provide some alternatives come the spring term, especially in terms of the system concept, which I'm quite attached to. That said, I think we have a lot of work still to do, and I'm looking forward to contributing to the extent that I can. To quote John Lewis, we've been making good trouble, and I think we'll probably continue to do that.
Yeah. You don't have a hand up again, do you, Ron? Okay. Hands have been weird today. Anyone else? I'll say that taking on the role of chair for me was very, very weird, because I think in this room, I probably have the least experience as a full-time member of faculty. When David and I started our term, he had 10 times as much experience in the system as I did. And it was odd, but it's precisely that reason. You're such an excellent, knowledgeable, and like sincere group of people that it really doesn't take that much. So that working with David has been excellent. And we're a group, a self-organizing group somehow. So I just want to say what I'm really proud of having being able to say, oh, I was chair of this group, but really all it meant was that I got to hang out with some amazing folks and get to represent you sometimes. So thank you. And also, I feel that we have, and Myrna in particular, Barbara in particular, who have been around so long, we are not letting you all go, so that is great. We get to keep you. But also, I want to say that I think certain priorities or maybe projects have already sort of revealed themselves moving forward, and I just kind of want to float a couple of them to think about before we make sort of decisions next year. And I think Jen has identified one for us, because PACT is something that we achieved sort of with the cooperation of the legislature, but there are a lot of details to be worked out. And even beyond just the implementation, there's the design. Jen mentioned that only some people only have the benefit of a couple $100s from PACT, and that's because of the last dollar design. And the last dollar design has also been an obstacle to offering this to university students. We should be broadening it to the universities. But the way that it works is that we end up investing more in students who have more, and we can't offer it to the universities. So if we can participate in making really informed recommendations to how to hone that, I think that would be really significant. And then we have the alternative structures that we can talk about in terms of governance. And the other is just I've been really surprised at the role that I'll just say that I think that there should be no difference in the kind of advocacy that we take on behalf of the system in terms of funding of the system. And that is an area where we could directly cooperate with the system, with the regents, to make sure that the system is funded. But we need to have the right kind of communication. And David and I have started talking with Ben Barnes and with Sean Bradbury, who's the government relations person for the system. But I think we need to continue those conversations so that we can more effectively. We have no differences there. We should be aspirational in our asks, and we should be clearly defining what the gaps in our budget how they actually serve students, what the gaps in services in the state are and are going to be if we continue in this direction. So thus far, we've been sort of responding to crises only. You can only do that for so long, and we've been doing it for a long time. So that sort of vision and the funding necessary and clearly defining that ask for the legislature is something that I hope that we'll be able to do into the future also. So that's where my head is at the moment. Folks have other thoughts. You too, Jen. All right. Okay, so I guess we'll come back to goals in January, where maybe we'll be handing it off, maybe we won't. Let's see. I am looking for, what's next? Old and new business? Anything here? Can I just use this opportunity to say that, to report something I just forgot to report about ASA, which is that CCS 101 has been vetted for CLIL and diversity outcomes, and it will be fully implemented in fall of 2023. That was another report to ASA that happened. Myrna.
I just had a question of clarification, and this is from previous information I think that was provided us with regard to the guided pathway advisors. And I don't know if it was you, David, but I was in a meeting and I shared some information about the term limits on those particular positions. I think there may have been a report that said that these positions were going to be hired for 3 years. Was I mistaken on that? Yes, I was mistaken. Lois is shaking her head. Or something about the funding for these.
What they were doing, Myrna, is they were going to be using the HERF funds to pay them, and they can only pay them for the next 2 years or something on the HERF funds, and then that's gone. And then we were told by, I don't know, Allison Buckley, maybe. Hold on. That I'm sorry. That our enrollment would increase so much that they would just pay for themselves after that.
Yeah, I brought that up at a number of meetings of the Finance Committee. It's an unrealistic expectation, obviously, and there's a fiscal cliff. I mean, one of the reasons for the consolidation supposedly was the fiscal difficulties of the community colleges, but here's one where the system has itself created a fiscal cliff, because after FY23, Lois is quite correct, there's no money available. So it has to be taken from somewhere else, or supposedly it will, magically appear. We don't have any indication of the actual effectiveness of the hiring of these additional advisors. And moreover, as we just saw in terms of the announcement of the money being made available for mental health counselors, it takes more than just advisors. I mean, faculty play a role in that because they're the ones providing the courses, and counselors for mental health, that's pretty important too.
Can I just say that the person who is saying that these guided pathways advisors will pay for themselves after HERF funding is no longer being able to be used because our enrollment will have increased so much is the same person who said because of COVID, the community college enrollment would increase tremendously as well, not fully understanding who our students at the community college actually are, obviously. So it should be a little scary about these guided pathways people.
Well, I'm concerned. That was a big concern because I have recommended some my mentees to get their feet wet that would serve the institutions well. But here, I also said in the same breath that this may be a temporary position. However, when I mentioned it in another platform that I serve on, they indicated, oh no, these are being advertised as tenure track positions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which means that the institution will have to find some resources, right?
Yep. Yep. They're permanent positions, but they don't know where the money's going to come from. And in addition to assuming that our enrollment will increase by 25% so that it can pay for itself, the amount that will cost is more than the consolidation was supposed to per year, is more than the consolidation was projected to save per year in the first place. So it's incoherent. The question is just whether it's risky to take that job or whether, that we'll take the hit elsewhere.
Okay. That's something to pay attention to. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, we had one of our advisors reclassified as a guided pathways advisor. So in other words, right, her pay came from, was basically what they did was they shifted her pay over to this money, which is really scary for her without telling her. She found out like I think she might have found out a day before it happened or maybe the day after. But that's one of the issues. I testified on this at the caucus, at the community college caucus, and pointed out that at Naugatuck Valley Community College we have an advisor to student ratio of 30-1, and the Guided Pathways Advising Program has been marketed to legislators and everyone who will listen as improving the ratio to advisor to student ratio to 250-1. So they're spending COVID relief money on something that will make advising worse at Naugatuck Valley Community College.
Okay. Let me, if we're done talking about this, I just want to go back to the diversity outcome for CCS 101. Comment in the chat, there aren't even any diversity outcomes. I can't keep up and I don't know. And I think what he might have said was that it meets one of the diversity outcomes. I'm very curious because there's now a Center for Diversity. I don't know what it's called, but it's run by like Kim James and Carrie Beckford at the system. And I wonder how much participation they're having in pushing to make this meaningful. Because
they don't have any learning outcomes. What they did, the work group that was put together for this diversity thing, what they did is they came up with course objectives. And basically they said, okay, courses that do diversity all will have these particular aspects to them. But there's nothing, they have done nothing like the other gen ed categories, which actually have outcomes as to what students will learn and what students will be able to do when they've completed the course. Nothing like that has been developed at all. In fact, they proposed a committee to come up with that. So this was a committee that's put together, right, to come up with outcomes, and they kicked the can down the road and came up with course objectives instead. And now they're vetting courses based on course objectives rather than learning outcomes. That's ridiculous.
And that's particularly disappointed because it doesn't just water down that course. It stands in the way of students having a much more meaningful actual diversity course. And it also stands in the way of hiring people who actually have those areas of specialty so we could diversify like thought in the college, which will shift the culture to serve our majority Black Brown students. But so whatever.
I mean, it's offensive to anyone who believes in equity and anyone who truly believes in providing a welcoming and inclusive space for all of our students. It's completely offensive.
Yeah. Lois.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aren't they teaching all about white middle class norms in this course?
Yeah, that's what the course does. Okay. I guess am I sharing this with folks, David? My situation? Is that worth a conversation?
If you wish, I mean, what does Lois think?
Yes.
Yes, she's
Yeah?
shaking her head yes.
Okay.
All right, so
Um,
let's put it this way. I am requesting that you do it
Okay.
against your better judgment and your personal inclination, so that if there's any fallout for your having said what you're about to say, I'm going to assume responsibility.
And it has been requested before. So I am currently under investigation, so I can't discuss the details of the day with anyone. But I can tell you the fact that I am under investigation for misconduct, having participated in a bit of a demonstration outside Middlesex Community College when the Governor Cardona and Secretary Cardona and any number of legislators were present. The purpose, you know, and that's it. And that investigation has been ongoing for a bit over a month now, I think. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but those are the facts. So we'll see how that goes, and thought I should share that with you all. And you know, folks have asked me to do that also. Yeah, Fran.
You know, having been through this star chamber, because that's what it is. First of all, you'll have, if anything happens, anything, let us know, obviously. Let me know personally, because I will do anything in my power to assist you. I was at that demonstration, and it wasn't a demo, well, it was sort of a demonstration. It was a rally.
Yes.
And it is interesting that some people who were there are being investigated, but others, such as myself, are not. So that's interesting. But I think we all know what this is. I'll just stop there. But again, anything I can do, let me know. This is outrageous.
Thanks, Fran. Lois, did you have a hand up?
Oh, can I expound just a bit on it? It's what happens when you walk out of the free speech circle and you go into a spot where you're no longer allowed to speak freely in this country. It's what happens. There's only little circles that have that you're allowed to do free speech in, and that's it.
All right, and well, I should make it clear also, I'm not the only one. I think, Brent, I'm not the only one. There are certainly other folks that just letting you know about me. All right, cool. That was a downer. Happy holidays, everyone.
Oh, may I just make a last comment after that, which is one more. There are two individuals who we have not fully recognized. I think there are two of them in our meetings, and they have brought us, I think, moments of joy, or at least contemplation, when we are otherwise preoccupied. And these would be Lois's cats.
That's right.
And I think it would be appropriate. I think it would be appropriate if one of the
there's
cats,
one right
if that
here.
cat
Here
were
he
to
is.
make the motion for adjournment.
Yes, please.
Anthony
channel-
just did. Anthony moves to adjourn.
Thank you, Anthony. We are adjourned. I'll stop the recording.
Please.